America's top ghost hunters relive their most extreme assignments.
Something was hunting me this whole time.
Hardened veterans of the paranormal, these are the cases that truly tested them.
I don't think I was ready for this.
In the psych ward of an abandoned hospital, an investigator is feeling violated after a terrifying attack.
Stop! Stop! Don't touch me!
Get away from my daughter!
My dad instantly switches into dad mode.
You know, do what you want to me. Don't ever come close to my daughters.
In West Virginia, a seemingly perfect home harbors an unwelcome and dangerous guest.
Get out of here!
There is no negotiating. It wanted us out.
And in Indiana, the ghosts of former prisoners are still locked behind the bars of an old jailhouse.
What are you? Please don't do that. Don't stop.
Whatever was there was saying things that I just don't feel comfortable even discussing as a woman, a person, a daughter.
The intensity of human emotion, life, death, trauma is embedded within hospital walls, which is why abandoned hospitals often have a reputation for being haunted. It's long been rumored that the dilapidated hallways of this hospital are haunted by spirits. When renovations start on the old building, contractors soon discover the scary stories may be much more than just rumors. Mysterious shadow figures.
Hello? Hello, who's there?
And most disturbingly, a strange, threatening whisper.
There was a couple rooms, especially in the basement, that civilian employees just refused to work by themselves because they would hear the sound of a woman's footsteps in high heels walking across the floor, and there was nobody there.
Len Miller is a paranormal investigator intrigued by haunted hospitals.
I liken the paranormal to fishing. You throw a reel out there, you hope you catch something. Most of the time you won't, but every once in a while you catch something big.
Len's background in law enforcement is a valuable tool in the world of ghost hunting.
I am a retired police officer, so I have the mentality that my job is to protect my client, my job is to protect my teammates. It's just natural to me.
Len knows all too well that hospitals can be hotbeds of paranormal activity. Back when he was a cop, he had a disturbing encounter at a hospital.
I was assigned to patrol, and I was taking a report at the hospital when it was still open.
Len's work is interrupted when a gunshot victim staggers into the ER. Len calls for help, tries to save him, but his efforts are in vain.
Sadly, he died. I was right there. I saw the gentleman take his last breaths, and I still to this day remember what he looks like. A few months later, I had driven into the ER area to finish up a report, and I looked up and I saw this same man standing outside the ER. First thing I thought was, this guy's trespassing and he shouldn't be there. And then I realized that was the guy I saw die, and I did this double take and he was gone.
Len is deeply affected by his experience. When the opportunity arises for him to investigate yet another haunted hospital, he quickly assembles his team, co-investigator J.C. Rositas and Len's daughter, Tori Miller.
When my dad told me that he was going to go investigate at a hospital, I was so excited because I'd seen the hospital from different locations. You'd catch your eye and you'd wonder what's in there. So I begged to go, and finally he conceded, and I was able to go with him.
For JC, the hospital immediately exhibits signs of the paranormal.
The first time that I stepped into the hospital, I felt almost swallowed. You walk in and you feel a presence of the history there.
Anxious to see if they can communicate with one of the spirits, the team heads to an alleged area of ghostly activity, the psych ward.
When you walk onto the floor, it feels very oppressive, almost as if you're not wanted. There's a feeling when you're there that you're being watched constantly, and the people who are watching you are not happy you're there.
Tori feels it too.
You're almost overcome with the presence of you're being looked at from almost every angle around you.
Determined to face the entities head-on, JC has an unusual idea.
My background as a pharmacist, I'm very familiar with a lot of the psychotropic drugs and things that are usually given for behavioral health control. So I went to the nurse's window and I called out, I said, "Are there any patients here? We have your meds ready." And I started calling out various names of medications.
It's time to take your medication.
The response to JC's communication is immediate and disturbing.
Diazepam. Razepam. Clonazepam.
As I was calling out these medication names, there was a dark shadow that was starting to form.
Clonazepam.
It was something that was getting darker and darker just by the moment as I was calling out these drug names. When you see a shadow figure manifest, it's something that you do have to be careful about. The darker the shadow, it usually means it's much more malevolent.
Clonazepam. Zolpidem.
Len fears that JC is about to be overcome by the dark presence.
JC, stop!
JC snaps out of it, and the shadow disappears.
Let's get out of here.
Anxious to escape the malevolent presence, the investigators move through the ward.
This is perfect. Turn on the recorders.
Len attempts to make contact with any other spirits present.
What year is it?
I'm asking several different questions. What year is this? Who's the president? What's your name? Basic information that we want to get.
Who's the president? What's your name?
But it seems the spirits are in no mood for talking.
Dad!
In the psych ward of an abandoned hospital, a powerful spirit presence has made itself known.
JC, stop!
But as the investigation continues, the ghosts are getting physical.
Jeez!
I felt a burning on my arm, and it felt really painful. I wasn't near a wall, so I couldn't have accidentally leaned up against something. There was nothing coming from the ceiling. There were no cords coming down that could have scratched me or anything like that. There was nothing like that. There was nobody ever near me, so I couldn't figure out how it happened. When I am scratched or when I'm attacked, all my defensive training comes to mind, and I'm just ready for a fight.
Len thought that was bad. Things are about to get a lot worse.
All of a sudden, I feel like I'm being touched.
Wait. Don't touch me.
Then it becomes more sexual in nature, with being groped.
Don't touch me! Don't! Stop! Don't touch me!
It was all sides around me. It felt like somebody was on my right side, my left side, and right in front of me, touching me. When you can't see where the assault is coming from, it's terrifying. You can't say, hey, stop this. You can't swat a hand away. You're powerless.
Stop it!
Horrified, Len jumps to his daughter's defense.
Get away from my daughter!
Now, when my daughter was touched inappropriately, that angered me. It angers me when ever somebody on my team gets touched or hurt or whatever. But your kid's different. You know, do what you want to me. Don't ever come close to my daughters.
My dad instantly switches into dad mode, and he wants to fight back, but he can't. So he's upset, which is even more frustrating for everybody because we can't do anything to stop it.
There was a weird sense of not just anger, but fear. Whatever's there, it's almost like all bets are off. Anybody it wants to go after, doesn't matter who it is, they're going to do it.
Unable to stop the assault on his daughter, Len knows the only option is to flee.
So when my dad pulls me out of the room, and I'm shaking because it's my first terrifying experience, and he's trying to console me, which is only making me more upset because I feel bad that my dad feels upset.
But before they can get out of there, the spirits turn their attention to JC.
I started feeling pain on my back. It was almost like a heat, kind of like type of pain where it started to sear.
Jeez! Oh my God! Okay!
Fearing their very lives may be in danger, Len orders his team out of the building.
There are times when you just have to take responsibility for your team. I have people whose safety depends on my decisions. If I believe my team's in danger, if I believe it's getting too dangerous, time to say goodnight.
For Len and his team, the conclusion is clear. The hospital is truly haunted.
I don't like to use the word haunting. People think of it as, you know, the classic 1940s movies, the ghosts with chains around it, you know, moaning. Hauntings are not that. Hauntings are just people coming back from the dead. And that's what we saw. We saw somebody coming back.
But for both JC and Len, the knowledge that the building is haunted is valuable, both to themselves and to ghost hunters everywhere.
As investigators, we grow. From each investigation, no matter how long you've been doing this, you learn something new each time.
The most rewarding part of this investigation, I would say, is like every other investigation you're on, knowledge. The more knowledge you get, the more information you can build up, makes the field of paranormal investigations more credible. And the more credible we become, the more the scientific community has to take us into consideration.
Still to come.
I immediately started to hear a man speaking.
An abandoned jailhouse may not be as empty as it first appears.
I couldn't tell what he was saying, but I could hear a deep, raspy male voice, and immediately froze.
It's one of the most defined shadow figures that we've captured in a decade of investigating.
But first, a suburban home hides a terrifying secret.
Get out of here!
We were looking at this dark figure, and we couldn't see through this thing.
When David moves to a small town in West Virginia, his new home feels almost too good to be true.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good.
The neighborhood is perfect.
Do you just move in here?
The neighbors seem friendly enough, but appear nervous and unsettled around his new home.
Yeah. No thanks.
Nice seeing you.
David starts noticing peculiar noises in his new home, disembodied voices, and children laughing. The laughter is so frequent that it becomes impossible to sleep through the night. Then, David starts seeing a shadowy figure. Leave! In West Virginia, new homeowner David is delighted with his new house and its idyllic neighborhood. But there's a lot more to the house than first meets the eye. Leave! Terrified by the events happening under his own roof, David reaches out to paranormal investigator John Hines. A seasoned ghost hunter, John began working in the paranormal field in order to help people like David.
There are a lot of people who are going through a lot of bad things, but they don't want to talk to anybody about it because they're afraid of how they're going to be perceived. And part of my ultimate goal is to kind of help validate for them what's going on and maybe even help them find their voice.
John assembles his team, investigator Josh Fogelman and psychic medium Deanna Reynolds. Deanna immediately notes the atmosphere surrounding the home.
My first thought about this investigation was a negative feeling. It didn't feel good to me. There was a heaviness to it. And there was also kind of a depressed feeling. It was very dark.
John, thanks for coming.
My colleagues.
As the investigators head inside, one thing strikes them all.
I kind of felt like we were going to have activity that night. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up as soon as I walked into the house.
Confident that there's a spirit presence in the house, the team begins their investigation on the main floor.
Our first EVP session was downstairs, and we were using a combination of a K2 meter, digital audio, and our PX device. A PX is kind of like, you could think of it as an EMF meter that actually has a vocabulary, it actually talks.
Are you the one who drove the previous owner from this house?
What we got on the PX was a very solid voice that said, leave. Are you the one who is responsible for the previous owner leaving this house after a week? I think we were all startled at first because we didn't expect to hear that.
Deanna hears the response physically too.
It was a male voice. I believe it was pretty deep and it was very forceful.
After that, it was silent.
Keen to identify the exact nature of the spirit, the team heads upstairs, the epicenter of the alleged activity.
We're not alone.
For this phase of the investigation, John decides to use a plasma ball.
A plasma ball is a glass globe, and they're designed to shoot little streams of electricity through the ball using a small electrostatic generator. And the nice thing about these is that if there is any kind of an electrostatic field around it, you'll see it kind of move within a few moments after we turned it on. What we got was an EVP that actually said, energy. Energy. Hearing the entity, saying energy, what that was telling me was whatever we were dealing with could actually see that ball. It knew what it was.
The spirit response is fairly conclusive evidence for John and the team. This is an intelligent haunting.
An intelligent entity is one that actually interacts with you. You can, if you're asking questions, this thing is answering. It's something that, knows you're there.
Hearing a giggle come from the other room, psychic medium Deanna decides to follow the sound.
At this point, I stepped out of the room, and that's when the door closed.
The door closed, and we went to open it, and there wasn't any lock on it that we could tell, but the door didn't want to open again.
Deanna, are you all right? Deanna!
Separated from her teammates, Deanna quickly becomes anxious.
Help! Help! Guys!
I just kind of got a panic feeling, which I felt was from my fellow team members being in that room stuck. And being the one outside of the door, I was a little concerned for their safety and my own. I'm vulnerable, standing outside the room, wondering what's going on. Is this coming after me now, or is it in there with them?
And Deanna's anxieties are not unfounded. In West Virginia, ghost hunter John Hines and his colleagues are investigating a domestic haunting.
Okay, whatever's here, this is something that is truly powerful.
But when the team gets separated, things start looking very dangerous.
There was something negative, evil in this location, and I didn't feel it was very safe to be there with it.
Meanwhile, John and Josh desperately try to open the door.
First things we tried to do was to open the door, and we weren't able. It was as if it was locked, even though there was no lock on that door.
Suspecting that a powerful demon is present, John has an idea.
Give me your crucifix.
One of the tools that I wanted to try using was Josh's crucifix, because a lot of times when you use a symbol like that, it will draw something out. I held it up and said, I'm holding a crucifix, a symbol of God. Basically, how does that make you feel?
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.
Now! Deanna! Are you okay?
But as the door swings open, John realizes it isn't over yet.
So as soon as that door opened, we could see what we were looking at was exactly what David had told us.
Get out!
We were looking at this dark figure, and we couldn't see through this thing. And it filled almost the entire width of the stairway.
Face to face with the demon, John perseveres with a crucifix.
It just felt like this cold rush pushing back up the stairway. It kind of took my breath away.
The reason it's dangerous for a human to be around an entity like this is they can try to attach to you. They can try to break down your mind, and they can try to even take over your body at times.
The demon is strong, but so is their faith, and the power of the crucifix seems to work.
I will be done! On earth!
Did we get it?
We looked to see whether, it was back or whether it was behind us, and it was completely gone. Well, at this point, there had been just so many things that had happened. We were all really emotionally drained, and at this point, I didn't feel that there was any reason to, keep going along and have things escalating to the point where maybe we could be in real danger.
I'm out of here. I'm done. I'm not doing this.
John terminates the investigation. But once the dust has settled and the investigators are recovered, they need to give David a review of their findings.
In talking to David, what I had told him was, at this point, you're dealing with something that is a demonic entity. It's a pretty strong one because it is impacting things in the environment. He ultimately decided he couldn't live with it, and he wound up moving to a completely different town.
But for the ghost hunters, a case closed is a lesson learned.
One of the things that I learned from this investigation is that, just like our other demonic encounters, is that no matter how strong you feel that you are, these things are always stronger than you're going to be.
Paranormal investigators are experts at separating professional from personal.
I was concerned that potentially spirits of these inmates may hurt my daughter.
But when ghost hunting is the family business, all bets are off.
Oh my God, stop!
Get away from my daughter! Get away from my daughter!
The old Blackford County Jail in Hartford, Indiana. Established in 1879, countless violent criminals lived and died within these historic walls. When the prison closes its doors in the early 90s, rumors start swirling about mysterious activity inside the old jail. Witnesses report metal bars clinking, cell doors opening and closing, and shadowy figures moving around the building. The reports pique the interest of paranormal investigator Alan Tolf. A former law enforcement officer, his approach to ghost hunting is pragmatic.
I do believe in the paranormal, but I'm going to ensure that I go through the checks and balances with each piece of evidence to ensure it's valid.
Alan's investigative partner is his daughter, Anna. An experienced ghost hunter, she's careful to protect herself from the entities she encounters.
I think one of the challenging aspects of paranormal investigating is being able to separate your everyday life from your life as an investigator, especially when there are concerns of things piggybacking or following you home.
Intrigued by rumors of the paranormal, the Tolfs arranged to spend the night investigating the building. Alan's experience in law enforcement means he knows all too well the dangers of being at a former jail.
I was concerned going into this investigation that potentially spirits of these inmates may attempt to hurt my daughter.
I did feel worried that I would be targeted in the jail. Men were housed there for numerous reasons related to harm to women.
And it seems their concerns might not be unfounded.
You could immediately feel a very heavy environment.
You could start feeling like a tension and anger, almost like hostility towards me. Felt like I was being watched.
Nonetheless, the Tolfs decide to begin their investigation at the reported epicenter of the activity.
As we began our investigation, we headed down to the basement, the area that was used for solitary confinement. It's referred to as the dungeon.
Alan and Anna begin setting up their equipment. In addition to their usual recorders, they've opted to use a REM pod.
A REM pod emits a EMF field, and if that field is disturbed, if anything breaks that field, the REM pod is activated.
But as they're setting up, the investigators get their first taste of the paranormal activity. The reputation of the old Blackford County Jail in Indiana has given paranormal investigator Alan Tolf reason to worry.
I was concerned going into this investigation that potentially spirits of these inmates may attempt to hurt my daughter.
And the mounting evidence of a spirit presence seems to suggest that his concerns were not unfounded.
Dad. Dad, footsteps over there.
You could hear what sounded like footsteps shuffling or scuffling across the floor.
the investigators begin to suspect that they're being taunted.
Shortly after that, the REM pod began to activate.
For the REM pod to go off, there's only two ways for it to go off. Either you physically putting your hand on the antenna or for something to be breaking the field.
Dad, it's going off.
Encouraged by the activity, they decide to conduct an EVP session to try and connect with any spirits present.
During the EVP burst session, I was asking questions along the lines of, who's in there? Are you a deputy?
Who's in here?
We could hear what sounds to be a male speaking. It's difficult to understand what he's saying, but he does sound angry.
Jailer? A guard? A prisoner?
Now convinced there's a strong spirit presence within the cell, the investigators decide to play back their recording. What they hear is disturbing.
Shut up. Crap. Shut up. Crap.
I immediately started to hear a man speaking. I could hear a deep, raspy male voice and immediately froze.
The aggressive nature of the communication leads Alan to a theory about the spirit.
Based on the responses we received, I believe this to be potentially a angry inmate that remains in that solitary confinement to this day.
Whatever was there was saying things that I just don't feel comfortable even discussing as a woman, a person, a daughter. I don't feel comfortable repeating something so offensive.
Dad, there's something there.
Come on, this is enough. Let's go.
Worried by the spirit's aggression, Alan and Anna decide to move to another part of the basement. But despite the activity, Anna in particular is keen to see the investigation through.
You have this internal conflict of wanting to run, but wanting to investigate, and not wanting to let them take control of you like that.
Anna's determination to continue may come at too high a price.
It felt like being a young female walking through a jail full of angry inmates, and it felt like they were all watching me. It felt like they were trying to belittle me, almost like they were taunting me, I guess would be the better word to use.
I know you're here. You can talk to me. What are you? Please don't do that. Please stop.
Being touched in any manner, let alone an inappropriate manner, makes you feel beyond violated. You can't protect yourself. And it's beyond uncomfortable.
Please, don't stop.
But still, Anna is determined to keep investigating.
I didn't leave because I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm there to experience these things, to capture what I can, to learn more. Have that be good or bad, I'm there to learn.
Going into the investigation, I was apprehensive about Anna being touched or taken advantage of, and then now it's happening. So it was extremely upsetting, and it pissed me off.
Oh my God, stop!
Get away from my daughter! Get away from my daughter!
Shaken by the ordeal in the cell block, the investigators head to the relative safety of the sheriff's quarters. While Anna takes some time out, Alan sets up the equipment. Once again, the paranormal presence quickly makes itself known. checking the recording equipment, Alan is shocked by what he discovers.
Oh my God.
At the old Blackford County Jail in Hartford, Indiana, investigators Alan and Anna Tolf are attempting to make contact with a spirit presence. And checking the recording equipment, it looks like they may have succeeded.
Upon rolling back the video, I observed a shadow figure move within the room.
I mean, it's an incredible shot. It's an incredible image, very compelling.
It's one of the most defined shadow figures that we've captured in a decade of investigating.
The investigators are keen to communicate with the new presence by conducting a double-blind spirit box session.
A double-blind spirit box session entails running the spirit box out of the digital recorder into a headphone set. Now, Anna has the headphones on and can only hear the responses coming through the spirit box. I'm asking questions. Anna cannot hear the questions that I'm asking.
We did this by giving me like noise-canceling headphones. All I could hear was the spirit box. And we said, I'll just spit out whatever it is I hear. Dad can ask the questions to see if we could get these relevant responses without any influences whatsoever.
Who are you? Do you live here?
Dad, it said yes, it did.
After a short amount of time conducting this session, Anna's answers begin to align with the questions that I'm asking.
But things suddenly take an unexpected twist.
Dad, it's a little boy. It's a little boy.
Hearing a little boy's voice come through saying things like, help me, I'm lost, things of these nature.
I have no idea why a little boy would be in this jail, other than he was potentially a child of one of the sheriffs, or just a little boy that got lost in a place that a little boy shouldn't be.
Needs help. Help me.
He says he's lost.
Ever the father figure, Alan becomes determined to help the little boy.
I reacted as a father, as a dad would. As any lost child is just, it's sad.
Do you need help passing over? Do you want to move forward?
You see your loved ones. Go, walk into the light, go into the light, go into the light. I asked the little boy if he wanted to move on, if he wanted to cross over to wherever it is we go after we die.
But Alan's attempts to help are suddenly interrupted.
Dad, an older voice just told him to shut up. He's really angry.
There was a really deep voice just now, but I don't know what it said.
An older man, an angry man, came through and scolded the boy. The responses were very direct, and the little boy would not speak.
Leave him alone. Just let him talk.
I have no idea at the time what Dad's asking, what he's doing. I'm just shouting out what I hear. I could hear a little boy come through. I could hear an old man come through. When the old man would come through, the little boy would stop talking for a while, then he'd come back through.
He's back. The boy's back.
Alan is desperate to help the little boy, but the older voice refuses to let go.
Let them go.
I can't.
Yes, you can. You accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. You're doing so good. Go into the light. I said, if you're crossing over, just give me some sort of sign, say crossing, something along those lines. Do you accept
Crossing?
Crossed. He crossed.
At that point, Anna said crossed. I stopped the session at that point, and it was probably one of the most fulfilling experiences that I've ever encountered during a paranormal investigation.
My dad is the most incredible man I know. And being in law enforcement for as long as he has been and the training he's had, I think he was really able to utilize that to help this little boy.
It was a really gratifying moment. As investigators, as a father and daughter, it felt like we had accomplished something positive.
The investigators leave the prison exhausted from their ordeal. And although the investigation was harrowing in places, both Alan and Anna feel their visit was worthwhile.
If I could go back, I would have everything happen exactly the same way. Helping this little boy made all of my experiences in the basement worth it. The difficulties, the trouble, it made it worth it, knowing that this little boy was okay.
This investigation and the experiences we had here will stand out forever for the mere fact that we were able to help this little boy cross over. I'll always remember that, and that'll always stand out.